So I'm going to introduce our first presenters and give you a little bit idea of what we're going to be getting started with. So the seminar, the first part that we'll be having with Michael and Randy from Brunswick Memorial Home and Mount Sinai Memorial Chapels. Their seminar is going to guide you through pre-planning and preparing for life's most important transition and the incredible financial and emotional benefits of pre-planning. We decided to have this program. We think it's timely and it's an important and helpful discussion to have for you and your family. So welcome.
It's good to be here. I'm Michael Klebacki, and this is Randy Gagnon, and we're the owners of Brunswick Memorial Home, our sister firm, Mount Sinai Memorial Chapels here in East Brunswick. And tonight we want to talk a little bit about end-of-life planning. To keep things a little bit fun, if you keep an eye on our slides, you'll see that there's some ducks. If you keep an eye on which slides have the ducks, and you get in touch with us afterwards, and we'll have some prizes later on. But we're a second-generation family-owned and operated funeral home here in East Brunswick, and we've been in business for almost 40 years now. Mount Sinai Memorial Chapels has been voted the best Jewish funeral home in Central New Jersey by readers of the Home News Tribune, and Brunswick Memorial Home has been voted best funeral service in Central Jersey for over a decade.
My name is Randy Gagnon. My career in funeral service began over a decade ago. I'm a graduate of Mercer Funeral Service Program, and I'm a licensed funeral director in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And I'm a certified pre-planning consultant as well.
And I grew up in the funeral home, and I've lived in East Brunswick for most of my life. I have 4 degrees. I'm licensed in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. I'm also a certified pre-planning consultant, and in my spare time, I'm a pilot for United Airlines on the Boeing 737. But we're here today to talk about pre-planning, and it's kind of a vague term, so what really is it? And it's as simple as having a conversation about end-of-life planning before the need arises. It could take any of a number of forms. It could be just simply writing down your biographical information in one place so that people don't have to go search for it, to deciding what your funeral should actually look and feel like, all the way to prepaying for services in advance. Could be done anywhere. It doesn't have to be here at the funeral home. It could be through phone or email. It could be regular mail for your comfort, convenience, and it doesn't cost you anything to even start having the conversation.
And while it can be difficult to think about these arrangements ahead of time, it's a really good idea. It makes things easier for your family later on. You're able to concentrate on helping each other and not faced with making decisions quickly at a very stressful time. Without exception, those families who have made advanced arrangements have told us how much easier it makes things later on. Perhaps the most important aspect of pre-planning is letting your family know what's important to you. We see significant shifts in society. What would you like to happen in terms of your remains? Burial, cremation, could be entombment, burial at sea. There's a plethora of options. Incorporating military for our veterans, or fraternal organizations like the VFW, or Veterans of Foreign Wars, Knights of Columbus, Jewish War Veterans Association. Is religious services important to you? We are well-versed and able to help with all services, from Christian to Jewish to puja services for those of Hindu descent, and humanistic services for those who do not want to incorporate a religious element.
But what it really gets down to is what's important to you and how do you want to be remembered? And that's why we'd like to start the conversation with you now. A funeral doesn't have to be a cookie cutter traditional affair. Do you want the slow ride in the Cadillac, or are you more a Harley Hearst type of person? I took this photo a couple of years ago. I really like it. It shows a true traditional funeral. A nice wood casket with the flowers on top, and it just stands out really well against the snow. But we could also do something that's a little bit more personalized for you. And these are some of the things that we've done over the past couple of years. Do you want flowers placed on the casket at the gravesite? Or are you more a butterfly, or even a butterfly release? If you're thinking of cremation, do you want a traditional urn, or do you want to be turned into a tree? Or maybe have your ashes scattered at a favorite place, or turned into a piece of artwork, or even create a 3-dimensional custom urn that represents who you are as a person. A little bit later in the presentation, Nicole Raft-Turcott, who's one of our interns and administrator here at the funeral home, is going to talk a little bit about how to create an obituary that will talk more about who you were as a person.
Another benefit of pre-planning, it allows you to control cost by matching up your wishes and finances. You also have the ability to prepay your funeral services, alleviating the financial burden that paying for a funeral can cause a family. National average for funeral expenses has increased significantly over the years. Pre-planning allows you to make the decisions that you and your family are comfortable with financially.
Many of the families that come into the funeral home ask us, are there government benefits that are available? And the truth is there really aren't a lot. Social Security Administration provides a lump sum of a grand total of $255, and that's only to survivors or dependents, and that's paid after the fact. Medicare, if you're on Medicare, it does not provide anything whatsoever towards funeral expenses. If you're on Medicaid and eligible for a burial benefit, it provides only for a minimum dignified funeral. Not all funeral service providers, cemeteries, or crematories will even accept Medicaid funding. And if they do, it's typically for a bare minimum service only. And if you take any of the Medicaid funding whatsoever, there's maximum limits on what you can spend on the funeral as well.
The Veterans Administration in most cases does not provide any money towards a funeral. There are some veteran cemeteries that provide free cemetery space, but the family is still responsible for all other funeral costs. By making pre-arrangements, you are able to plan and fund the funeral of your choice before your assets are used up for medical care and before they are reduced to meet Medicaid eligibility levels. Money that is set aside for a funeral does not count against assets when qualifying for Medicaid. Making a pre-funded funeral arrangements allows you to plan and pay in advance for the funeral that you want.
An additional element that is getting more and more important that we're seeing to talk about is who's going to be responsible for your funeral when the time comes. A lot of people come into the funeral home with the misconception that the power of attorney or the executor get to make the funeral arrangements. Well, the power of attorney has no power whatsoever after a person dies, and the executor has no power either. New Jersey right of disposition law clearly spells out who has the right to control your funeral. The long story short, if there's any sort of disagreement in your family, if it's someone that you don't get along with, there's religious differences, etc., you should probably name a funeral agent to make sure that your wishes are going to be respected when the time comes. Several families we've served over the past few years have had to go to court even to resolve their differences in how a funeral is going to be handled. And that just adds significant expense, angst, and wasted time. There's a couple different ways that you could designate a funeral agent. Larry Kroll is going to talk a little bit later about preparing a will and some estate planning, and it could be included in your will. There's also a simple form that we could provide you here at the funeral home if you just give us a call that we'd be able to provide to you. That will allow you to designate a funeral agent as well.
And how can we help? One thing that we do at our funeral home that makes things a little easier for you and your family is that we provide a cost assurance program. If you decide to prepay the funeral home charges in full, we guarantee those funds will cover the cost of the funeral home when time comes. Last year, our families that we served that had prepaid their services saved an average of over $2,000 by prepaying their funeral expenses.
And members of our care team are certified pre-planning consultants that can shepherd you through the entire process. Our certified pre-planning consultants promote expertise and professionalism in advanced funeral planning. They're each recognized by the National Funeral Directors Association and required to keep up with continuing education to ensure that we meet all of your pre-planning needs.
We've been honored to serve the community for over 40 years. Serving every family is not just our motto, but it's something that our care team lives by. But just don't take my word for it. Read through our family testimonials. It is the best way to select a funeral home that you can trust. Whether you'd like a traditional religious service, something special, or anything in between, we'd be happy to chat with you and honor your and your family's wishes.
If you'd like to reach out to us to start the conversation at no cost, please feel free to reach out to us. You could give the funeral home a call, send us an email, or click the Contact Us link on our website, and we'd be happy to help.
We'd also like to invite everyone to our Care One's Veteran Drive-Through Lunch, which will be held on November 11th from 12 to 2 p.m. That'll be at the new Care One facility, just down the road across from the fairgrounds. Please do RSVP in advance, and a reminder, remember to email us if you saw the ducks and what slide they were on, just so you can receive a free gift from the funeral home.
The next presenter is going to be Nicole Raff-Turcott, who is one of our admins and one of our interns here at the funeral home, and she's going to talk a little bit about how to prepare an obituary.
Hello, everybody. Going to switch screens. My name is Nicole Raff-Turcott. Can everyone see my screen? I'm here
Yes.
Perfect,
Yes.
thank you. Again, my name is Nicole Raff-Turcott. I am administrative assistant here at Brunswick Memorial Home and Mount Sinai Memorial Chapels. I am also in the process of obtaining my mortuary science degree so I can become a licensed funeral director. This evening, I'd like to discuss with you the importance of writing your life story. Ultimately, writing an obituary. A great obituary tells readers more about you than just what you did with your life. The great ones tells readers a better sense of how you lived your life and what kind of person you are. It basically tells your story. Before we begin, I just want to remind everyone, again, just to kind of keep an eye out for the ducks. If you remember what I was talking about or which slide I was on, at the end, we'll ask you to email us and you can win a free gift. So here we go. So the act of writing one's own story can be several things. It can be thought-provoking. It gives you an opportunity to reminisce about all the memories and experiences that make you, well, you. It can be rewarding. Taking the time to write those stories down can be extremely rewarding. And ultimately, it's a gift. It's a gift that you get to share with yourself and also all those that are closest to you. So you may be wondering, where do I start? We suggest gathering some basic information. Things like your biographical information, your education and work history, clubs, organizations, houses of worship that you may belong to, veteran service information, and any personal accomplishments or life achievements. Once you gather all that information and begin to start writing, know that it's okay to be funny. It's okay to be sarcastic. It's okay to be boastful. And it's okay to be as detailed or as vague as you want. After all, it is your life story. Obituaries can be written outside of the box. Here are just a few examples of that. He met the love of his life, Irene, who was hoodwinked into thinking he was a charming individual with decorum. Boy, was she ever wrong. What's not to love about a woman who loved her children and grandchildren almost as much as she loved the Boston Red Sox, cold Budweiser, room temperature Budweiser, cigarettes, airplane food, and the OJ trial? Robert Clyde Drew, beloved husband, father, and papa, drew his last breath January 25th, 2018, mainly we suspect to prevent himself from having to watch the Patriots and the Eagles in the Super Bowl. Danny Lloyd was a generous man, giving away many of his possessions in the months before he died. He even left his car to 12 different friends. So now that you gather all of your information, how do you put it together? Well, obituaries normally follow a very similar pattern or format. They start with the death announcement, which then leads into important details and life events. After that, it lists family members, your funeral service information, and finally ends with memorial donation information if you prefer. The care team and I here at Brunswick Memorial Home and Mount Sinai Memorial Chapels are here to help you at no cost. We are available over the phone, through mail or email, in person, via Zoom, whatever works for you. We would be honored to help you write your life story. Lastly, again, if you remember what I was talking about when you saw the duck, please feel free to email me at either one of the emails listed on your screen and tell me what I was talking about. I would love to be able to send you each a free gift. Up next is Larry Kroll of SGK Legal Team, who's going to talk about estate planning.
I had to remember to unmute myself. I want to say thanks to Randy, Michael, and Nicole. I unfortunately have no ducks, but I'll try to be light anyway. I'm here to discuss estate planning, which is something that you would do in conjunction with planning a funeral or well in advance of planning a funeral, but it is part of end-of-life planning. And so what is it? I'm going to share my screen. So what is an estate plan? Typically, I'm part of Sapphire, Gottlieb & Kroll. We've been in East Brunswick for 40 years. Myself and my partner, Alan Gottlieb, have an office in Williamsburg Commons, and we would be happy to help. What is an estate plan? So typically, it consists of a healthcare directive, a power of attorney, a living will, revising your will if you've already created an estate plan, and other what we call VIP documents, which we can touch on later, but typically, I've been told that my screen is not shared. So let me try again, and if, oops, is that better? Do we see it now? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
You'd think that after 7 months of Zoom, we'd all get this right, but I apologize. So when I was talking about myself and my partner, here's a picture of myself and my partner. We have offices in Williamsburg Commons, and again, I apologize for going over things I've already talked about. So what is an estate plan? As we said before, it's a healthcare directive, a power of attorney, a living will, from time to time to revise your will if you've already created one, and other what we call VIP documents, which I can touch on a little more, but would include things like the funeral arrangements that were talked about earlier, that are important, but would, not everybody has them, or would be in addition to the three main documents which we believe everybody needs, which is the healthcare directive, the power of attorney, and the living will, and the other estate planning documents. So an estate plan in its simplest form is just figuring out what you want to do after your death with your belongings, the other property that you have, and if you have children, who you would like to ensure that they grow up to be responsible human beings. And these are all things that are part of a traditional estate plan. As we said, it also includes additional documents like healthcare directives and healthcare powers of attorney. So what is a healthcare directive and a power of attorney? These are documents that specifically designate people to make healthcare decisions on your behalf if you are unable to do so. And so the directive consists of your wishes, what you want to happen under various different circumstances and scenarios. And the power of attorney is the legal grant of authority that tells a healthcare provider that someone else has the legal right to make those decisions. Typically, we combine those into one document where you express your desires for treatment and who would make those decisions on your behalf if you're unable to do so. And they would consist of things like when and under what circumstances you want to be, donate organs, whether you want any and all measures taken to keep you alive or not. Specifically under COVID, we know that sometimes people can be in the hospital on machine-assisted breathing for long periods of time, but then they make a swift recovery. So these are things, your desires could change from time to time. And again, this is something that you need to revisit occasionally just to make sure that it comports with the times and the circumstances. We all know that these are unusual times. and we've been helping quite a few people draft healthcare directives and powers of attorney who had never thought about this before. We're assisting quite a few college-age kids because people don't even think about that. But once a person becomes 18, they have the legal right to make their own decisions, and a parent no longer does. And this time has made people contemplate that, and we've been doing quite a few healthcare directives for considerably younger people than we used to do, than we traditionally have done so in the past. And that's something that if you have children, grandchildren, or you know other people that you might want to think about, because it's, again, very unusual times. The power of attorney is a different document. That is one that designates someone to make decisions on your behalf of a financial nature. And as I think Randy said before, power of attorney is only effective while you're alive. The power of attorney terminates on death, and the person you designate no longer has the ability to make decisions. Why is a power of attorney important? A power of attorney is important because, again, you may not be in a position to make financial decisions on your own behalf for whatever reason. And someone's got to pay the mortgage. Someone's got to pay the student loan. Someone has to pay the car loan. Or more importantly, somebody might have to contact an insurance company and make arrangements for payment of various things. There's untold situations when you might need someone to act as your power of attorney. I've been designated power of attorney by clients who are perfectly competent. One of the misconceptions is that the power of attorney would only really come into place when someone's not competent anymore. But I frequently act on behalf of people who are competent but not mobile. So someone has to go to the bank and sign a document. Someone has to get a check. I have been sent to banks and other places to do things, basically act as a client's eyes, arms, and legs when they are unable to do so on their own behalf. And by giving me power of attorney, they are entrusting me to make those decisions or to take those actions on their behalf if they're, for whatever reason, can't do so. Obviously, it would also come into play if someone is unable to make those decisions, if they're in the hospital, not competent, whether it be temporarily or permanently. But these are important documents and decisions, and when you're deciding whom you select to make these decisions on your behalf, think through who best would, who you would trust to make these decisions if you weren't around. Who would you trust implicitly to do this and take care of your needs? The person that holds these powers is a fiduciary. That means that they have a sort of a higher obligation to do things that would be in your best interest as opposed to their own. And so you need to make sure that you choose people who will do that, who will honor that commitment. And that's why frequently, attorneys are chosen, or other trusted advisors, financial advisors, or other people to fill this role if you have no one else that you think can do so. And lastly, the last traditional document that people have is a last will and testament. This is the document that sets out what you want to happen when you're no longer around. The other two documents are important because while you're still here, those are, this one is the one that becomes operative when you're no longer around to make these decisions. And again, the person you designate as power of attorney is not the executor. No longer can that person make these decisions. So you would have to choose somebody to dispose of your property, to make the gifts that you want. If you want to make a gift to charitable donations, if you've made funeral plans, you would potentially name the funeral agent in the will, or at least to designate in the will who, where you, if you have these plans that, were referred to earlier, where they're to take place and who to get in touch with to make sure that your wishes are implemented. If you have children, you need to choose who you want to be guardians and who you want to take care of them, as I said, to make sure that those children turn into adults that you would be proud of down the road. So these are very serious and significant decisions. But you know, that everyone should deal with, and we think sooner rather than later. Many people think a will is only for the wealthy. That a will is something that, you know, only people with a lot of property have. But if you have a car, if you have a house, if you have a couple dollars in the bank in a retirement account, you need a will. Because if you don't make those decisions, then the government will make them for you. And you might not like who the government's going to leave your property to. If you have charitable institutions, religious institutions, or other causes that you enjoyed throughout your life, you might want to designate that there be some gifts made to those institutions, and that would be set out in the will. You also consider, if you have children, you need to consider the needs of your children. If you have grandchildren, you might want to make sure that you have some money set aside to pay for their college education or grad school or you know, other things that are important to you. These are things that would be set out in a will. If you have children, as I said, you need to select people that you trust would honor your wishes and continue to raise them as you would. And there's just a list of things that you would contemplate when making those choices. So it's important to keep your will up to date. It's important to revise it from time to time. It's important that as your life, as you reach different milestones and accomplishments in your life, that you update your will. When you have children, when you buy a house, when you make funeral arrangements, when you have grandchildren. These are all things that might trigger a review of your estate plan to make sure that it still is in alignment with what you want. We also suggest, in addition to these documents that we referred to, the VIP documents earlier, people ask me, well, what are those? You should keep all of your important documents, or at least a list of those important documents together. Your deeds to your house, the titles to your car, the account numbers for your retirement accounts, insurance policy information, are just a few of the things that you should keep together and make sure that your executors know where they are. If you're a veteran, you want to keep your discharge. If you're an immigrant and you were naturalized, keep your naturalization papers. Anything that has a significant impact on your life should be kept in one place, or at least there should be a list somewhere that tells your executor or the power of attorney or someone who's going to act on your behalf where these documents are, so that they can make sure that they take care of whatever situations might arise that you can't take care of on your own. As I said, we've been in East Brunswick for 40 years. We would be very happy to answer whatever questions you might have regarding estate planning or any other legal need. Initial consultations are done as a courtesy and are complimentary. And just like Michael, Randy, and Nicole, we've been in the community, we remain in the community, and we hope to be able to help members of our community for a long time to come.
So we actually have one question directly for you, Larry.
Okay.
After the power of attorney is over, when you're deceased, who takes over next?
That's a great question. So it's sort of seamless, but once you pass on, the power of attorney is automatically terminated, and the person that you designate as your executor would then have the legal decision-making authority for what then becomes your estate. There are some procedural steps that you would need to go through to obtain. Essentially, there's a court order that you need to get that appoints you as the executor. But as long as you are named in the will, essentially in New Jersey, it's a very easy process. You take the will down to the surrogate's office, you show it to them, they ask you a couple of questions, and they give you the court order that you then can use to act on that on the estate's behalf at that point in time.
Okay, so for everyone that has questions, please place them in the chat. I do have someone on the phone, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to for the person who is on the phone, I am going to unmute you. You do not, if you don't want to ask a question, that's fine, but I want to be able to give you the opportunity. So hold on one second. They may not want to be unmuted, and that's fine. But I also, hold on. Okay, so they apparently are not, it's not unmuting. So I do have a question for all of you, actually, and I think that you'll have some interesting answers. With it being the time of COVID and social distancing and things, what kinds of things that we might not have usually thought of in the past should be taken into consideration now when we're planning any of these things? Because obviously we are in a weird time, and you know, we've been here for a while and we don't know how long it's going to be. What kinds of things should we take into consideration when we're doing the pre-planning and wills and all of that?
Well, Michael, Randy, and Nicole, think about that. One thing that it's interesting, but the actual signing of the documents is now much more challenging. You know, in the past, we would just have people come to our office, we would sit around the table, we would get to know each other a little bit, you would sign the documents, and in the days of social distancing, it's much more difficult to do that. So when the weather's nice, I set up a table outside in the courtyard, and people do it outside, or they'll come into my foyer, and we try very hard to be sensitive to people's privacy, but also be sensitive to the public health. That's you know, that might not be the direct answer, but that's one of the changes and issues that we've been dealing with. That's a direct result of it.
For us, you know, it's a completely different way of doing business. You know, for the first 30 years that we were in business, you know, all of the decisions were usually made sitting around the same table. You know, so between the varying COVID restrictions as we went through the first half of this year, to how we got special permission from the state of New Jersey that we could actually use DocuSign. It was actually against the law for us to use DocuSign before this year for many of the signatures that are required in creating funeral arrangements. So we're trying to work through to make sure that we can't get that some of that stuff doesn't go back when we get out of it. But being able to video record services, you know, a significant portion of what was difficult for us earlier in this year is the normal end of life process didn't really exist. You know, there's a lot of people that went to the hospital and their loved ones didn't get to see them for 2 weeks. So whereas normally, you know, there's someone at the bedside in the hospital that's able to start making those decisions. In many cases, it was a nurse that called the family to let them know that someone had passed. And so trying to make those initial decisions and try to get into the normal process was a bit of a challenge. And then working around restrictions, trying to give people the opportunity to have a meaningful funeral was something different every day. And even to this day, you know, funerals are allowed to have up to 100 people now. So there's some times where we have to work around it a little bit, but we have to take each day as it comes.
Just trying to figure out ways to say yes.
I'd have to agree, and obviously the constraints placed on everyone by the virus have increased stressors, and this is something I think that those of us who are trying to assist people in making these decisions have to keep in the back of our minds. You know, as Michael said, you know, we couldn't notarize things, or notaries couldn't do anything remotely, and documents, you know, the power of attorney, the healthcare directive, and the will all need to be notarized. And I think, at least as far as I understand it, you can remote notarize, you can do a remote notarization, but you can't do remote witnesses. So a will requires 2 witnesses. So although I could notarize your signature remotely, the witnesses can't watch that remotely. So it's, I mean, there's some very strange kind of, which is why I have to have people still come to my office, even in this day and age, to get these things done. So it's, yes, it's made it, we have to think through, exactly, you said, how to say yes, how to accommodate these desires. I mean, these are not things that people want to talk about over the phone sometimes. They'd much rather sit down face to face, and we really can't do that. So again, I like what Randy said, you have to come up with new and creative ways to say yes and still honor someone's desires for privacy, for confidentiality, and to, you know, to devote the attention to people to get this done in a professional way that we just didn't have to think about that.
Okay, we're getting questions rolling in now. So this is a question for Larry. If you want to change your will, can you just handwrite in any additions? So
the short answer is no. If you have a will and you want there to be no questions about enforceability or, you know, which is the most recent document, it really should be done in front of the notary with 2 witnesses. It doesn't have to be the attorney, but your signature needs to be notarized. The person theoretically should at least make sure that you understand, not only are you signing a will, but what that means, and have some, and 2 witnesses. So that's, you know, there are certain circumstances if you literally are unable to do that, you know, you could write down what you want, but those sort of exceptions are few and far between. Now, you can have a list of dispositions. You know, I have 6 pieces of jewelry, I have 6 grandchildren, I want, you know, John to get the ring and I want Jane to get the earrings. I mean, that kind of thing you can do in a handwritten list, as long as the will sort of says, please refer to the list for certain things. Because if you had to go back to a lawyer every time you had another piece of jewelry or something sentimental, you know, it's not realistic. So that, you know, that kind of amendment and change you can do yourself, as long as the will sort of alludes to the fact that there is an attached list of items that you and where you want them to go. But in general, a formal will needs to be or should be done, you know, in front of a notary and with witnesses.
Okay, so this is for Randy and Michael. What is the cost of pre-planning a cremation?
The short answer is pre-planning never has a cost associated with it. It doesn't cost anything to come into the funeral home to have the conversations. If you do want to come in, we'll go over exactly what it is that you want. You know, for many years, when cremation started taking hold in the United States, it was kind of referred to as, you know, a direct cremation where there's no services, no nothing. There's nothing with cremation that prevents you from having a more traditional service. You could have a visitation with cremation. So it really depends on what you want to do. But what we would do is we would create an itemized statement that has exactly what you're looking for. And we'd be able to provide a specific quotation for you. And then if you wanted to prepay, you could. And New Jersey has some of the strongest consumer protection laws in the country when it comes to creating and prepaying for a funeral. The funeral home has no access to that money until a death certificate is signed. So if you decide to move out of state, your plans change, whatever the case might be, you could always take that money out and use it for something else if you need. The only exception is once you're on Medicaid, then they would go back to the state, but that's kind of a different scenario.
Okay, so here is another one for Larry. If there is no estate will, what happens? Do all the assets, are they held for a certain amount of time? And does estate planning avoid the fights over estate among bereaved family?
Again, another great question. If there is no formal will, there is a statute under the law. The state of New Jersey will say who gets what, and a spouse would get a certain percentage and children could get a certain percentage. But again, the decisions are made for you. You don't have the right or the opportunity to designate who gets what, how it would transfer. And it may not be what, you know, the disposition may not be what you want. In terms of avoiding fights amongst the bereaved family, I would say that having a will that specifically outlines what your intent and desires are can't hurt. Unfortunately, you can't avoid every situation. Talking about when families fight about or what families fight about would involve much more time than we have tonight. I will tell you that these kinds of fights over probate and wills are some of the ugliest, most heart-wrenching and emotional, litigation that you can get involved in, because it literally tears people apart. I'm sure that Mike and Randy will tell stories about families who were sitting on opposite sides of the room, wouldn't even talk to each other. And they're there for the funeral of a loved one, and they won't look at each other. That they had to accommodate that. I don't want to say craziness, but those kinds of issues. When it really all should be about the deceased, and it's really now about keeping the two sides of the family from fighting in the hallway. Having an estate plan can't hurt. Won't avoid it, but it can't hurt.
Okay, and our next question, another one for Larry. In which situations should you consider forming a trust?
Okay, trusts are a little bit more of a sophisticated estate planning tool. They're not necessary for everybody. New Jersey has one of the easiest probate processes, meaning that the process of getting that court order, allowing someone to act on your behalf, is relatively straightforward. And once that person is appointed, you basically can act as if you were the person, so you can dispose of property and take care of things. Now, there are certain reasons to create a trust. If you have a significant amount of money, then it becomes a tax planning tool. If you are trying to plan, do Medicare or Medicaid planning, it might be an appropriate tool for the right person if you're of an age to worry about that, because there's a certain time frame that Medicare can look back and get the money back if you haven't done it appropriately. If you have children with special needs, or there are reasons for creating trusts. By and large, the vast majority of people don't need them, at least immediately. And if you have questions, we'd be happy to address those offline, because, as I said, it can become very, very fact specific.
Oh, wow. There's a lot of legal stuff. And obviously you cannot give in-depth advice since
Right.
we are in a generic meeting. So I'm going to read the one question that's shorter, but that longer one, you might want to look at more closely, Larry, because
Okay.
it seems to be a situation. It might be a case that we just, you provide your phone
Okay.
number at the end. So what is the cost of estate planning, including trusts? Do they actually go by what the couple have in assets? Hopefully you can, I'm going to defer to the specialist.
Okay. So again, the cost of an estate plan, we think, is relatively affordable. Certainly the more sophisticated the needs are, the more expensive it's going to be. I don't want to speak for every attorney or in the room, and we're trying to provide information, but I think that the average cost, depending on whether it's an individual or a couple, if it's a very straightforward estate plan for a single person, you might be able to find someone that'll do it for as little as $500, $750. If it's a couple, you might be able to create the estate plan. Again, if it's very straightforward, you might be looking at $1,000, $1,500, $2,000. I mean, if you are talking about a very sophisticated estate plan involving trusts and other vehicles to for tax planning purposes, the numbers go up from there. And again, if you have specific questions, we'd be more than happy to discuss that with you, depending upon your particular needs. All right, so then.
It was about wording of
Okay,
beneficiaries.
so is it, I'm going to read the question to make sure I got it. So is it
It's
very
more a
important?
statement than the question.
Okay,
That's
okay. So I think if I understand the question, did the beneficiaries have to be specifically named? The answer is yes. Do they have to be present in order to divide the assets? The answer is no. That's the executor's job. The executor is the person that you designate to implement your wishes. So if let's say that you're married and you name your spouse as the executor, and for whatever reason you want all of your money to go to your children, A, B, and C. The A, B, and C don't have to go to the bank to physically take care of that. I mean, they can, but the executor would would contact the bank and would say, this account needs to be split 3 ways. I need 3 checks. Or if they want, people can come to the bank and create accounts, but the executor is the person that implements the wishes. The people that are receiving the funds do not necessarily have to go and be present, but they certainly do need to be named and named properly. I hope that answers the question.
For all of you, some of these discussions are very hard to have, whether it's either a cultural thing, because it's not something, you know, there's taboo, or there's a generational just difference in things. Is there a good way to get started in having these conversations with people saying, look, I'm starting to do this, other than just telling them, hey, I'm doing this, here's the paperwork? Is there a way to start having those conversations to maybe make it easier when it does come to the end? Just saying, you know, besides, here's my documents, but any way to like voice any of these things that will also help with the paperwork and maybe put the family members at ease?
And something that we do, and all it takes is reaching out to do it. But we can start having just a very light conversation. But the first part of pre-planning, at least as it comes to funerals, is a lot of that biographical information. And so we have a worksheet that we can send you that's nice and easy to use. You could type right in it on your computer. And it allows you to put all of that information in one place. Things that you know, your kids probably know, but they might struggle a little bit to find. Things like social security number, where you were born, your parents' names, things like that. And just having that basic biographical information makes the process so much easier when the time comes. I've had a family come in and pre-arrange on a Saturday, and they thought it was going to be an extended period of time. And unfortunately, the person passed the next day. And when they came in to make the arrangements, they're like, it's such a weight off our shoulders to know that we had that conversation yesterday, because we made all of those decisions. We were able to have all those conversations with a clear mind, instead of now with everything else going on. You know, it would be a lot more challenging. So just starting to have the conversation, whatever respect it might take. We have files where people call us back once a year and we sit and chat for an hour about what they want, and plans change over time. We have some files that go back 35 years, and there's 35 years worth of notes in those files. And we still have paper copies of all of it. So, you know, when you do call us, we do take detailed notes. So if I'm not here, if Randy's not here, any of our funeral directors can pick up the file, know exactly where we left off, and with just a few minutes be able to figure out what we've talked about before, so that we can move forward and honor your wishes.
And to touch on something that Larry said too, it does ease the financial element. It eases the decision factor, and it makes a very stressful and challenging time just a little bit easier, and allows you to focus specifically on memorializing your loved one and grieving together as a family. And it is a hard conversation to have, but a necessary one as well.
And just I'll just add, you know, yes, these are difficult conversations. Anytime you're contemplating your own demise, those are hard conversations. But it's part of the process of growing up and maturing. I mean, you know, if you're a grandparent and you're a new grandparent and you have your children are now having kids, I think it's incumbent on you to look at you're still the parent of that new parent, and you say, it's time. You got to have a will. You need to designate someone to take care of these people. I mean, I think that a lot of it comes from family members who have done this in the past and said, this is something that you really need to take care of, either because of personal experiences where there have been fights, or there was not clarity on what needed to be done. You know, again, generally speaking, the impetus for a lot of these conversations, at least in our office, is having a kid or buying a house. All of a sudden you realize that you have other people you need to worry about and take care of, or you actually own something. And now you need to figure out what happens if, you know, I can't pay that mortgage, or I want to make sure that my loved ones are able to stay in that house as long as they want. And that's a lot of times the trigger for some of these conversations is these momentous life events. And that's a good time if you're a good friend or a parent or a family member is like, okay, you need to go talk to somebody and make sure that, you know, you're to borrow the what you guys said, your ducks are in a row, so that you do reduce the stress levels. And God knows we all could reduce stress right about now.
So I want to give a little bit more time. If anyone else has any questions, I'm going to give the opportunity for that person on the phone too, one more time if they would like to see if they want to ask a question, but they don't seem to. Yeah, any other questions? So while we're winding down, if you guys want to, if you have websites that people could go to or a phone number that you want to provide, you can do that now while we wait for a final question to come in.
So you could visit our websites at brunswickmemorialhome.com. And our phone number for Brunswick Memorial Home is 732-254-9393. And our website for Mount Sinai Memorial Chapels is msmc.us. And the phone number is 732-390-9199.
And first, I'd like to thank the library for giving, for arranging this seminar. I think that it addresses a lot of issues that need to be talked about. If you would like more information and you'd like to get that from our office, we're Sapiro, Gottlieb & Kroll. We're located in Williamsburg Commons. Our number is 732-613-8000. Our website is www.sgklegal.com. And if you have questions, you can email me at larry@sgklegal.com. And as I said, if anyone has questions and need more information, I will be happy to answer them down the road.
Yeah, so it looks like that one question from Judith, A, B, and C were all executors. So I think that's,
That's
a whole
something,
other thing.
That's something that's a whole nother conversation. Try not to have multiple executors because then they all have to agree. That becomes another issue.
Well, I think we don't have any other questions coming in. Thank you, Randy, Michael, Nicole, and Larry. You've given us a lot of great information. And thank you all for your time. And have a great evening. Be safe and be well.